Hi, and welcome to Concepts for Thinking. I'm Bree, and I'm going to be talking about a broad concept, which I call Hermeneutic Heuristics, which just is a fancy way of saying guidelines for thinking. Hermeneutics means interpretation, and my view of thinking, it all boils down to a form of interpreting the world, and heuristics is just another word for guidelines. So the three heuristics that I use to guide thinking, you'll see that the first and the third are kind of opposites, and the middle one is kind of related. It's kind of broader and related to the other two. But I use an acronym called GPS that obviously playing on global positioning system, but my heuristics, my rules are generosity, patience, and suspicion. So generosity is something that philosophers talk a lot about. They call it a hermeneutic of charity often, but I use generosity for my acronym. And generosity is important. I used to think it was important because we're trying to be polite to other people, and so we want to make a generous interpretation of their views before we critique it. But it's actually much more than that. I've come to realize over time that generosity is there to counteract a very common tendency of human nature. And that is when we encounter something that's new, that sort of counters our existing prejudices, that is difficult, we often adopt a hasty interpretation that's ungenerous, that's dismissive, just looking for a way to not have to believe this thing, or to not have to work hard to understand it. And so generosity tells you, as a guideline, it tells you, okay, slow down, find a way that search for any way that this idea makes sense before you rush to critique it and judge it. So that is generosity. Second is patience. You might already notice that there's a resemblance here, that patience, you might need patience in order, generosity might give you patience. So patience is more broadly, whenever you encounter an idea, you need to have the patience when you're reading something, when you're hearing something that you're trying to understand or make sense of. You need to cultivate the patience to fully give it a chance and really understand it. And the third is, perhaps ironically, suspicion. Now, philosophers or theorists of the 20th century, or who are familiar with the philosopher Paul Ricoeur, might be familiar with the expression hermeneutic of suspicion. This is a term that he used to describe thinkers like Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx, who sort of looked at their current situation, the accepted views of their peers, with a suspicious eye, and said, I think there's something more happening here. Whether that's more is, subconscious desires, unconscious desires, whether that's economic forces, class forces, historical forces that are sort of determining things differently than we think. But I would actually go back to Socrates as the sort of OG of hermeneutic of suspicion, because what Socrates did, and he taught all philosophers to do, is to encounter the ideas that are accepted and look at them with a strange eye and say, okay, this is something I think I understand, this is something maybe I want to have believe in, but maybe I don't understand it at all. And maybe the key is that suspicion that you cultivate actually is the gateway to new knowledge. And it's also an important guard against being sucked into a decentralized cyber cult, or any kind of idea that's really not well supported, but maybe you want to believe in it. You need to, when you find yourself just nodding along, just excited to believe in something because it fits in with your current views, because you really want to, that's when you need to cultivate a hermeneutic of suspicion. That's when you need to start going, okay, I want to believe this, but should I? So there you have it, the GPS, generosity, patience, suspicion. Those are my major guidelines for thinking. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.